shall see what the Holy Bible has to tell us about environment. Recently, I was in Calcutta at a meeting where people of different religions were present. And the meeting was called precisely to see how people of different religions can work together towards climate health. And we realized that all our religions speak highly about environment, about nature, and the duty humans have to protect creation, to protect environment. And therefore, it is always good to fall back on what we may say our faith vision. As a Christian, what inspiration do I draw from my own scripture to motivate me to work for climate health, for climate justice? We begin with the story of creation as we have it in the book of Genesis. The sacred writer is inspired by the experience his people had when they were in Babylon. In Babylon, the Jews encountered people who had a different religious tradition. In their religious tradition, there was a sharp contrast between matter and spirit. And they considered matter as dirty. Something of this is found in Zoroastrianism, or what we call the Parsi religion. Zoroaster was the prophet who is supposed to have proclaimed this religion. Now, according to the Zoroastrian tradition, the Parsi tradition, in the beginning, there were two powerful centers, shall we say, two cosmic powers, a good power and a bad power. And they had a fight. Unfortunately, the good power won the day. So what he did was, he killed the bad power and he decimated his body into small pieces of flesh. And with that, he made the diverse creation. And since creation comes from the body of the bad God, creation is not holy. Creation is not sacred. That is the story of Babylon, with whom the Jews lived for about 70 years. Now, the Jewish sacred writer wants to tell his story of creation. So, he shows his God as the only God, the supreme God. There is no one to challenge him. And he has only to speak, only to say a word. God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God need not fight. In creating the world, God does not undergo a struggle. He creates it freely. Now here, you could ask me, but why on earth did God create? What was the need for God to create? God was supremely happy all by himself. Why did he create? here we may learn something from a Hindu mystic saint, a mystic poet. He is in dialogue with Shiva, and in the Hindu tradition, Shiva has a consort, a spouse, Parvati, and she is very beautiful. Now the mystic poet feels that Shiva is coming after him, in search of him, and he does not understand. So he tells Shiva, hey Shiva, you are mad. That Parvati is coming after you, and you are neglecting her, that beautiful lady, and you are coming after me, this wretched sinner. Surely you are mad. Indeed, God is mad. And because he is mad, he made this universe and made us who created problems for him. Definitely, God is mad. That is the madness of love. So the first thing when we reflect on creation, environment, nature, is to remember that this creation, this nature, is the work of God's love. It's a gift of God's love. Now suppose someone gives you a gift on your birthday. It may be a very ordinary gift from one of your poor companions in the school. But because it is ordinary, you will not throw it out. You will, at least for some time, you will cherish it. It's given to you by a friend. And as long as it lasts, it will last. You will not destroy it. Suppose he gives you a pen. You will use it as long as you can, as long as the pen runs. The pen is beautiful. The pen is sacred, a sign of friendship. Similarly, the whole of creation is sacred, a sign of friendship. The sacred writer wants to make sure that we don't miss this message. So what does he do? God works for 6 days. At the end of each day, the writer says, God saw what he made, and it was good. God looks at what he has done. A mother looks at a child, and she is full of admiration. My child is so beautiful. My child is so lovely. And in a African language, there is a saying, even the ugliest child has a mother. For a mother, her child is beautiful, always beautiful. And so for God, his child, creation, is beautiful, sacred. And so the first day, second day, fifth day, sixth day, 6 times the sacred writer says, and God saw it was good. But the sacred writer is a Jew, remember that? And for the Jews, number 7 is important. Number 7 is a sign of totality, of fullness. And so, after the 6th day, the writer says, God saw all that he created and he found it very good. Very good. A double emphasis. 6 days, but 7th statement. 7 times. And the 7th time, very good. Do we believe this? That creation, that mud is sacred. That worm that looks frightening to us is sacred. The snake that frightens us is sacred. And there is no ugly, dirty bird or fly or animal. No. Because to say that something is dirty would be an insult to God. it would amount to say that this good God made something dirty. He does not do that. You and I can do it. You and I can dirty the work of God, but God will not make anything dirty. Whatever God makes is beautiful. And then what does God do? He takes mud and forms a statue. And he breathes into it. He is like a Brahmin Pandit in India. In our country, the statue of Ganesh in the shop is not sacred. I am celebrating Ganesh festival. So what I do, I buy a statue and bring it home. And then I get a Brahmin Pandit to perform a puja. And during that puja, the Brahmin will breathe life into the statue. This is called prana pratisthana, the bestowing of life, the infusing of life. So look, what is God doing? God is taking the mud of His creation and combining it with His own spirit, and we have the human person. This is the speciality of human beings. In human beings, creation and the Creator come together. And that is why the Bible says God made man to His image and likeness. Now, some important consequences follow. First, because human beings are like God, they are called to be in relation, a relation of love. That's the first thing to understand. God is a mystery of love. And notice, even though in the Old Testament we do not yet have the idea of the divine Trinity, somehow the text seems to anticipate. The text says, God said, let us make man unto our image and likeness. Some scholars will say that plural is a plural of majesty. Others will say God is in council with His heavenly court. All the courtiers, all His holy angels are there. And He is telling them, let us make man. Okay. But we can also see it as an unknown anticipation, ununderstood, unacknowledged anticipation of the divine community, the Trinity. And so, in the light of the fullness of Christian faith, when humans are the image of God, they are in the image of the Trinitarian God, and therefore called to love, called to live in community, in harmony. That's the first thing, love. Awareness and love. Awareness of the other, as different, and still wanting to preserve the difference. Biodiversity, in a way, is a reflection of the Trinitarian diversity. The three persons are different, and humans are called to become aware, and secondly, to protect. In ancient times, when a king, foreign king, conquered a country, after conquering the country, he would appoint a governor and return to his kingdom. Then the governor would get a statue of his king, put up in a central place of that country, in the main city, not one city, quite a few cities of that country. The statue of his king will be there. The statue reminds the people that the person whose statue you see, that person is your king. Now, God makes us His statue. And He is telling the whole of creation that I, the Lord, the God, am your king, and humans are only my servants. They are my governors. And therefore, friends, if you and I are governors on behalf of God, if we are servants of God, we cannot do what we like with creation. We cannot. We cannot think that humans are the lords of creation. Humans are not the lords of creation. That's a mistake. Humans are servants of creation. And they got to serve creation the way God created. God created creation with love. And therefore, you and I got to serve creation with love. Most of our environment problems are a sign that we have forgotten love. We have become people who grab for ourselves. To hell with the others. Let them die. I don't care. As long as I get what I want. I have the money to buy, and so I buy. Let them see they are hungry. They have no money to buy. Let them die of hunger. I don't care. I have money and I assert my money. That is our trouble. That is the tragedy. Humans have become worse than animals. Animals care for each other. The mother bird will bring food for her little ones. The cat, the dog will bring food for their kittens and their pups. They will not abandon. But we are abandoning. We are abandoning our children. Now you may say, but those are not my children. Okay, but they are the children of your father. And therefore they are your sisters and brothers. You can't say, they are not mine. If you do that, then you are making yourself God. And that is the original sin. The story of original sin is connected with creation. Why? Because God made creation beautiful. Then who made the mess? We humans. How? We thought we are God. You will be like God. The story of temptation tells us, if you eat this fruit, you will be like God. You will be like God. And therefore you will not need God. We humans, whether we are Adam and Eve, doesn't matter. Every human being, by his selfishness, by his sinfulness, vitiates, corrupts God's creation. And then what happens when we do that? The story tells us that God threw them out. They were meant to live in the garden, beautiful garden. They have lost their home. When we vitiate creation, when we pollute the earth, when we pollute our water, our air, when we pollute the soil, what are we doing? We are losing our home. God doesn't push us out. God is not like that. God doesn't take revenge and push us out. No, He does not. It is we who are destroying our home. We, not God. God will not push us out. He is a loving God. We are pushing ourselves out. We are abandoning our home. We are abandoning our mother. That is the biblical story of creation. The biblical story of creation ends on the Sabbath. And that is very beautiful. Later on in the book of Exodus and Deuteronomy, Moses will explain the Sabbath to the Jews. He will say, you were slaves in Egypt and God made you free. Or he will say, God made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day He rested. So you also must rest. But now what is important is, who are to rest? You, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your woman servant, your animals, and number 7, the stranger who is with you. Number 7. 7 people to rest, including the animals. Beautiful. And when man rests and when the animals rest, there is no plowing, the soil also rests. The earth also rests. And why do we rest? We rest to recreate, to recuperate. After work we are tired. We need rest to regain our strength, to recuperate, to recreate. And therefore, it may be good today to ask ourselves as Christians, what does the day of rest mean for you and for me? Notice in the explanation of the commandment, there is no reference to any worship. There is no reference to going to the temple or going to the church. No. It's a concern for people. You, your son, your daughter, your man servant, your woman servant, your animals and your stranger, the strangers who are with you, they will rest. Maybe those of us who have domestic servants could ask ourselves a question. Do our domestic servants have a weekly off? A weekly off with pay, with salary. That is biblical understanding. There is no point going for mass on Sunday if I am not prepared to give my domestic staff a weekly off with pay. I repeat, there is no point in going for mass on Sunday if I am not prepared to give my domestic staff a weekly off with pay. Because creation has to be respected. And creation is not infinite. It needs to recuperate. Any organism has to recuperate. It spends itself. It gets exhausted. It gets tired. It needs rest. And that is the real meaning of the day of rest. God didn't speak of worship. God is not worried about himself. They should worship me. No. God is worried about his children. They need rest. Are we observing really? Let us look at around our parishes. How do we celebrate Sunday? Basically thinking of ourselves. Do we take time out on Sundays to visit the sick, the old who are lonely, to visit children in orphanages, to visit abandoned people who have been put up in some shelters? Do we have time? That was the meaning of Sabbath, of the day of rest. Concern for each other, including the stranger, including the animals, including the servants. That was the original Sabbath. That is part of our Christian faith. Let us not distort it. No. As far as we know in history, the so-called Sunday obligation is a late development in the church. In the early church, there was no Sunday obligation. But there was the obligation to love your neighbor. That obligation was there. Let's go back to the original obligation of being a Christian. Love our neighbor. And the earth is also our neighbor. The birds and the fish are our neighbor. The animals, both in the sea and on the earth, are our brothers and sisters. They are our neighbor. We have to love them. And then we see in Jesus how nature finds its place. Jesus would not go to a temple to pray. Jesus would go to the synagogue. In the Gospels we have stories, Jesus going to a synagogue. But the wonderful thing is, each time Jesus goes to a synagogue, he ends up with a fight, with a clash. So, the Gospels bring in the synagogue because in those days people assemble at the synagogue. Even today, if you go to a village, to a Hindu temple, there is a courtyard. People will sit in the courtyard of the temple That is the place where they meet. And so it was in the Jewish society. That synagogue was the place of meeting. And Jesus goes not to meet God, but to meet the people. And end up with a fight. When he needs to meet God, he goes back to a lonely place, a hill, the desert, nature. Back to nature. The synagogue is made by us. The hills, the desert is made by God. Jesus goes back to nature. We have to learn to pray with Jesus. Pray with nature. And because Jesus prayed with nature, he could say, look at the grass, how beautiful. Look at the birds, how nourished they are. The grass so beautiful. Not even Solomon was clothed in that glory. Look at the birds. Your Father takes care of them. Jesus was aware. He was aware of the vine that brings beautiful branches. He was aware of how a small grain of a small seed can become a beautiful bush where birds can come and take shelter. Jesus was a son of the soil. If God was his Abba, the earth was his Amma. And he grew up in close touch with the Abba and the Amma. And so his parables, do not worry, the seed will grow. You put the seed and rest. The Mother Earth will take care. And then, look at the sun, look at the clouds. The sun rays on saints and sinners. The clouds drop water on saints and sinners. Nature is generous. Nature makes no discrimination because nature is God's love. So my friends, to protect nature, we have to return to the biblical vision. Look at the heavens. They proclaim the glory of God. Even they don't say a word. They don't say a word. The message they proclaim goes to the corners of the earth. They are the silent messengers of God's love, the work of creation. Let us ask God the gift we need to see that what he has done is beautiful, that it is good, it is very good.